What is happening, YouTube? It is Coffee Talk with Haze, episode 18, and today is 909 day. So happy 909 day to everybody. I hope anybody who's into that famous drum machine makes wonderful music on this day with it. Here's to you. Thank you. Okay, so today I want to talk about drums and drum machines and playing drums and maybe sequencing drum machines and kind of talking about all that kind of stuff. I will say that yes, the TR-909 is my favorite drum machine. I really love the sounds. In terms of the interface, I haven't completely learned the interface of the 909 through my TR-09, which tries to offer the same interface. And I notice that through my TR-08, the two interfaces between these two iconic drum machines are radically different. And it's very fun to explore how to sequence these things from their interfaces, from the front of them, as opposed to just using what I always do, which is to take my Squirt Pyramid and sequence the parts into it and have it sling MIDI over to those devices and make them sound thusly. For me, that's just the easiest way to get the drum sounds that I want out of it and to make sure that I can control the muting and unmuting of them from one central location. But it's so much more exciting to actually program these machines from their actual interfaces from the top and to control them individually like an instrument. And that's what's really cool about these drum machines, not just the sounds, but their interfaces. And that is really, I think, what makes the TR-808 and the TR-909 super extra special. Obviously, it's the sounds. But if you've never actually sat down and banged your head against the learning curve, of how to get into these devices, one, you may ask yourself, why would I want to do that in this modern age? Fair enough. You do this because you have the time and you want to. That's the reason why you do it in this modern age. And a lot of times you will get rewarded on some level. It's usually a very, very minor level, but there is some kind of reward in there waiting for you when you do these things, and it will reflect somehow in another piece of gear in the workflow that it offers. It just inevitably will. Okay, so this is my TR-909 that I just got. I don't even know if it's right side up or upside down. This is the cheapest 909 you can purchase on the market right here. Unfortunately, it's just a sticker, so it doesn't really do anything. But let's talk about drums, I guess. I'm a drummer. You may or may not know that. I don't really talk about it much. I think it's kind of cute when I hear people who are not drummers talking about drums, and I try to bite my lip and try not to say anything and be a jerk, a know-it-all, let people kind of discover the stuff on their own. But yeah, I'm a drummer. I mean, that's what I do. So all this music stuff, on top of it, kind of wonder, wow, how come you never do any chord progressions, or why don't you, do more songwriting stuff? I'm a drummer. I don't care about that stuff. I'm into keeping the foundation of the beat and to supporting the band who are going to come up with those things and those changes and so forth. And I bounce off of those changes. That's an important thing about a drummer, not to just keep a good groove and a good feel and support the band, but to also be responsive. Because as a responsive drummer, it gives you an opportunity to add something that sparks more interest in the other players, that allows them to then do something that they had not done before. Usually something pretty amazing. Sometimes, it's best to do these things in practice and practice until you can pull it off live. When it happens live, though, it really is something amazing. Okay, so the funny thing about drums is that it's really hard to get started playing drums on one level. It takes a lot of discipline because you can't make a lot of noise. Nobody wants to hear you suck at playing drums. That's the hard part. Nobody really wants to hear any musician, do a poor job of performing on that instrument, which inevitably is going to happen to all new players. When you come into this game, you're not going to sound good on this instrument. And you got to get over that by just continually playing. And hopefully you're playing where nobody's hearing you, so that you're not, that nobody's passing judgment on you in the other room. You're not making people cringe. And there are certain instruments that it becomes very, very hard to do that on, one of them being drums. Now, here being in the 21st century, we have electronic drums, which makes things so much better to solve this particular problem, which is making too much noise, too much racket. Number one, even if you're a really good drummer, people still don't want to hear it. If you're practicing drums somewhere in the middle of the day, you know, if you got like a business to run, anything like that, your neighbors trying to sleep because they work second or third shifts, you know, nobody wants to hear that, even if you're really, really good. What you got to do is you got to go out into an industrial area somewhere and rent a space where it's safe. You're not going to get mugged or anything out there. You may not want to go out there at nighttime if it's, you know, depending, but it is nice if you could have some place that's safe that you go to 24/7. So if you can't find like a dedicated rehearsal hall, or the rehearsal halls are just too cost prohibitive for you getting started, you just got to find somewhere where nobody's going to be disturbed by you making a lot of noise. But what about practice pads and sticks? Well, I'm here to tell you right here and now, they're no fun. It's just no fun. And that's a sad, sad thing. Because yes, it's absolutely necessary. And what I have here is a book that I'm currently going through. This is not for you unless you are a drummer. Now, if you are a drummer, you're already looking at this book going, oh yeah, this is really good. You can see it's very, very new, even though I've had it for a few years. Haven't really gone through it. Funny thing, it's only, 44 pages or so? And I don't know, I guess, 44 times whatever that number is, 12. You do the math, that's about how many exercises there are in this. There's a lot of repetition. There's a lot of overlap is what I'm trying to get at, but it's important overlap that builds out, that pulls out a lot of, it shows your weak spots and allows you to focus on them and then correct them, especially have a good teacher. This book is very, very simple. It's just a lot of single strokes. What I mean by that is we just alternate back and forth. Here I got a couple sticks. So, right, left, right, left, right, left, that kind of stuff. But what this book focuses on is the motion and the movement of how from one to the next. And it's forcing me to rethink everything. I've been playing drums for 30 years, and I'm here to tell you, I'm a rock and roll, kind of punk rock, mostly untrained drummer who I'm way into progressive music though. So, yes, King Crimson, Rush, all those bands, even like some heavy metal stuff like Meshuggah and Gojira and Lamb of God even, I like some like really good drum music and I really pay attention to that kind of stuff. But no, I've always been kind of a caveman drummer, in a way, in terms of my technique. Not really, I wasn't a trained drummer. I played saxophone in the marching band in high school. I was not a snare drummer or even a bass, on the bass drum starting out. And it is pretty important to learn these techniques because at this point, I've kind of hit a plateau in my growth and technique. So it's books like this that I think help intermediate. I'm probably kind of an advanced player, to tell you the truth. I'm very rusty right now at this moment in time. I would need a good couple months to get back up to speed. But no, I'm at the bottom end of advanced, if I am an advanced drummer. I kind of consider myself more like way up here, like intermediate, to be honest. And I'm okay with that. When I get in the studio, it's kind of hard for me to get like a solid one track without screwing up. And it didn't used to always be that way. When I first started playing drums, I had an easier time recording a good solid track in the studio than I do now. It's about overthinking. As you learn more techniques, it becomes harder to discipline yourself. It's the kind of the opposite of option paralysis. You want to just like do everything that you've learned, and your timing will inevitably suffer because of it. I think one of the hardest things about playing drums is recovering from a drum fill. And I do want to talk to you guys and gals about drum fills. I want to really focus at some point and talk to y'all more about drums and programming your drum parts and what the purpose is. Because, I hear a lot of improvement that could be had in a lot of people in the parts that they add percussive wise, rhythm wise to the music. And just very, very, very easy things that people can do to improve them in the sense of making the beat stronger. So beats are interesting. They can be weak or they can be strong. A beat doesn't always have to be strong. Sometimes weak beats are pretty cool, actually. It really just depends on what the context of the music is calling for. But the notion of just sort of throwing notes out there because we can, because inevitably, regardless of your workflow, you deal in loops. Music inevitably is a circle, which implies a loop. So it doesn't matter if you're using looping, straight MIDI, even if it's a MIDI file that is linearly going all the way out, you're probably going to copy and paste some of that. And if you not, I mean, you played it all, then you essentially did the copy and pasting through your performance. So, and that's awesome, actually. That's commendable to be able to play a performance that is that immaculate and that perfect. But everything essentially in this music is a loop, especially drums. And that's the whole point, is that the drums are the one instrument. Bass guitar too, because that low end harmony that ties right into the rhythm so nicely. But the drums are the ones that are the most repetitive, boring, and just dumb. So many times in the past I would say to people, trying to get a point across, drums are dumb. It's not that drummers are dumb. We always joke about that all the time, though. I mean, there's 1,000 jokes out there on that subject. But really, this is the whole concept of keep it simple. The whole concept of less is more. By leaving more space and only filling in the space where it's meaningful, you allow the other parts to breathe and to come through. You don't want your drums to just take up all the space. Now, I know that in my music, I'm throwing lots and lots and lots of drums there. I'm a drummer. I'm experimenting with things that I don't normally do if I was playing drums for, like, say, a rock and roll band or even a country band. I'm doing a lot of experimenting. Every once in a while, I may actually try to say, like, okay, I want to do something that a drummer would do. But for the most part, with the music that I'm doing here on YouTube, the drum parts that I create, it's not what I would play as a drummer at all. And the other thing I want people to realize is that I program my drums so that I can just sort of let them ride and leave them alone. So I don't want there to be too much syncopation in the right ways. I don't want there to be, like, let me give you an example. So if we're dealing with the backbeat, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. I want to be very careful if I ever add a clap that does thusly. 1, 2, 3. Just that little bit of change can cause it to become an annoyance over time. And it's actually better to avoid that and to, like, have it be implied somehow. If you do want that clap, add it in there with that double. If I do that, now I've got to be very, very conscious, to take it in and to take it out. And that's hard for me to do when I'm doing my jams because I'm so lost in the moment and I'm focused on so many things that I will just literally forget everything that the drums are doing. And that's what a true musician should really kind of do, I think. It's the drums are there to support your performance as a melodic or harmonic musician. How about that? As opposed to a purely transiently percussive musician. What is the drummer? Just the person that hangs out with a bunch of musicians? No, they're a musician too. It's just that things focused. It's like taking a color photo and then removing the color and it's black and white. And you're just seeing just the bare bones of the structure without any color. And that's like, music rhythmically without harmony and melody. Just the drums. And sometimes that's all music needs. It doesn't need melody and harmony. And the drums also add this sort of ambience of noise, which, if you're lucky, right, it's a little bit of, I'll try kind of chants thrown in there. Like the real fancy producers and their fancy studios on the fancy recording sessions that get the fancy money from the record labels. They may have time to go through and to try a bunch of different cymbals and a bunch of different snare drum heads to get the right sound. They don't really do that anymore. That's all 20th century stuff anyways. And in some ways, I don't miss that. I think it's kind of a joke to spend that much effort to get that perfect of a drum sound. It's almost ridiculous. especially when you can just like trigger something like a drum machine. And we've got it now to the point to where it's actually pretty easy to trigger drum machine sounds from an actual performance microphone picking up drums down to tape. And we've been doing it, since probably the late 70s. And it sounds fairly natural enough. The other end of the spectrum is that you're going to affect the snare drum and the bass drum so much that it's going to kind of have the tonal qualities of something coming from a drum machine or a sampler anyways. The chicken eats the egg, the tail chases the head, Ouroboros, all around and around and around and around. If you don't understand what I'm trying to say about that, there's nothing new under the sun. And at some point, life imitates art, imitates life in this particular arena. And this is where, sampling comes into a play. One of the things that's so great, I mentioned this before in a past video, I'm sure, about a drum machine like the TR-909, is you can say to yourself, well, it just has one snare drum sound. It just has one bass drum sound. It's got 3 toms. But, you can't, like, if you compare it to the SR-16, the SR-16 has a bunch of different drum sets. It has whole drum sets, right, that you go through. And the TR-909 is just basically one drum set. And you're paying $3,000-$4,000 for that. Or if you get something like the TR-09, and let's say that it wasn't discontinued and it was still going at list price and under, you're still paying more for that Roland boutique than, say, the Alesis SR-18, which is a great drum machine, by the way. Alesis SR-18, that's probably the drum machine that you should have, if you want to know the truth. It's boring, it's digital, it's dirty digital, it has limited individual outputs. I think it's got 4 outputs, but that's really quite a lot if you think about it. You can do bass, snare, and then a stereo pair for the other ones. And you can maybe throw some toms and, on that. It's really cool. I'm diverging a little bit, but it is really nice to take, like, if you've got a stereo output from your drum machine, your bass and snare on one and your others on the other side, maybe left and right. And the reason for that is when you're adding effects. Now, with these drum machines, the sounds are kind of already EQ'd and ready to go. So it's not hard to piggyback the bass drum and the snare drum on the same track and EQ it accordingly. You're going to compromise a little bit there. It would be better to have them on separate tracks. But this way, you could put your effects, your delay effects and other stuff on your cymbals and your toms and clap and that other stuff and not impact the groove, the bass and the snare. And you can play around with that. There's all, you break the rules all left and right, do all kinds of cool stuff. Right now, when I go back into my apartment, I'm going to start up my 909 jam for the day. And what I'm doing is I'm taking out of my patch bay, I'm copying sort of like a mult, the signal from my TR-09, and I'm basically copying it over so I have 3 copies of it. And I'm going to blend those in through different effects, and it's going to sound like a bunch of different drum machines. Because of this, however, because of the effects that I'm adding, I am going to add the Volca kick. I've decided I don't care. I'm not going to be a purist and only do 909. If I had the Volca sample, if the Volca sample was being nice and behaving and wanting to be a part of my rig, which is no longer wanting to be a part of my rig, it's not, of course, I'm being silly, but no, it's just not working out anymore. I would just use that instead, and I would have a 909 bass drum sample from it. There's some other things I can do to make that happen. I could use the S2400. It's too much right now. I'm going to keep it real simple. Like the kick's there. It's a kick. Maybe what I should do is I should spend some time. Yeah, I think that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back. I'm going to spend some time trying to get it to sound as much like a 909 kick as I can. Now that may be a complete effort in futility, an exercise in futility, I mean. But I think I'll give a good 30 minutes trying to figure that one out. So, I want to talk about practice pads. Check this out before we stop. This is a practice pad that was given to me by a good friend of mine. He and his father were in a Scottish pipe and drum band. They both did, what am I trying to say? Snare drums. They played the snare drums. And his father passed away when we were about like 19 or 20 years old. Way too young. I mean, he must have been in his 40s. I think it was a heart attack. And my friend gave me his practice pad because he inherited his father's practice pad, which he kept with him, and then he gave me this one. Actually, he sold it to me because, like, you know, it was $20, and we were, you know, he was in high school. That's a lot of money when you're in high school in the 80s. So, but this is a really nice practice pad. I've fortunately had it tucked away in storage. It's got some sort of like, I don't say water damage, but there's some discoloration here. And there's a word I'm looking for. I can't think of it right now, but whatever that is, it's got it. I don't know that I'm going to be able to clean that off. It seems like it's okay though. Like it's not actually deteriorating or any like that kind of stuff like that. But I'm definitely going to take better care of this in the future. The response on this is just unbelievable. It's like butter. And but it's, I mean, look at this surface area. I mean, you know what I'm saying? You ever heard the old saying, like, you know, you couldn't hit the broadside of a barn? You know what I mean? This is the broadside of a barn right here in terms of playing drums. There is something called the Wicked Chops practice pad. Whoa, I want to drop it. It's a little slick. Look at this. That's about the size of a silver dollar, I want to say. It's definitely much bigger than a quarter, bigger than a $50. You've probably never seen a silver dollar, have you? Well, that's about the size of a silver dollar right there. And what I do is I have a stand that this screws into, and this is my practice pad right here. And I have improved much by using this already. I got this tip from Dominic Fragman. Can't remember the other drummer's name that actually created this, but if you search him and find him, you'll find the other drummer. And the guy came up with this. It's absolutely brilliant. And with these sticks, these marching sticks, I mean, one can barely hit the surface of that. So it definitely has been forcing me to up my game a lot in terms of my stick technique. So if you're a drummer, you don't have one of these, seriously, get one. This needs to be your new practice pad. And I hate to be a sales pitch like that, but I mean, no, this is a game changer. I really believe in this product. And this thing probably weighs 2 pounds. I mean, I'm probably exaggerating. I don't know, maybe like, no, it's about maybe half a pound. No, what am I saying? That's a couple ounces at best. That's about a couple ounces right there. Maybe 4 ounces, we'll say. But it's got a lot of girth to it, and I haven't had any problem with it. It has not broken yet. You know what? I want to talk about sticks because that's a funny thing. When I started out, like everybody used Vic Firth, and because I'm a left-handed drummer, just naturally left-handed, although I wish that I really, really had just disciplined myself and forced myself to play right-handed. Would have been so much better on so many levels, but it's too late. It's never too late, but it's kind of too late. Well, since I'm left-handed and I'm so different already, you know, I don't want to use the products that everybody else is just using. Now, I did use Zildjian, you know, but I don't use Zildjian cymbals exclusively. I also use Paiste, and I love Sabian, Meinl. I have no brand affiliation at all. When it came to sticks, however, yeah, I was a big Neil Peart fanboy back in the day. I don't talk about that much. I'm a huge Rush fan. I am a tremendously huge fan of Genesis. I'm talking back to their first album, that boring kind of folk crap, okay, up to Invisible Touch. But yeah, all that. I love that music. Are you kidding me? And I've never seen Genesis live. Oh well. But I think, yeah, both Phil Collins and Neil Peart used ProMark. So this is the stick that I used, is ProMark, for many, 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 many years. My drum mentor in LA, when I was there back in 2013, he had like a sponsorship through ProMark and, gosh, what was the other one? Aquarian drum heads. So he was able to hook me up with some good products back then. Whole lines on my drum heads to get all my drums replaced. That's expensive. For me to replace all the heads on my drums right now, it's a 7-piece drum set. Easily could cost me $250. now. I haven't priced it. I can imagine things have only gotten more expensive. You know, over $100, under $200, it could be over $200 now, just depending on the quality that I want to buy. And we got a nice plane going overhead. So, but what I discovered through my drum mentor, who had this relationship with ProMark and Aquarium, was that they got bought out by Daddario, I believe, or perhaps, yeah, I think so. And they're just not the same sticks anymore. Now, there's a whole lot going on. As a drummer, I've always felt somewhat self-conscious about using wood, you know, it's kind of, sort of. Maybe it's not that big of a deal. You know, maybe we're not using that much, consuming that much wood, comparatively speaking, to other industries. I don't know. I haven't done the math on it. I will say that I don't like breaking sticks. I don't like breaking heads. And I certainly don't like breaking cymbals. There's no point in any of that. So technique is very important to teach you how to, like, preserve your equipment. And drummers, I mean, look at these things, man. We are back there just physically doing damage, potentially to ourselves, to our ears, to your ears, to our equipment. One day I watched a band play at the club here in town that I used to love so much. And the drummer hit a crash. And the crash on the stand just went over like this. And you have to imagine the crash was like this on top of it. And the whole thing fell over and it landed right on the bass player's bass cable, whatever you call that, his instrument cable. Snapped it right in half. Brought the song to a halt. The band recovered very well, though. It was really, really cool. They had a backup thing. And, you know, back then in those days, when people were first starting to embrace sampling technology, using some of these keyboards and so forth, you know, and being able to hit a button and have like a little drum machine just kind of do a little stupid little beat while the rest of the band is solving whatever problem just caused them to take the show to a complete stop. That's a game changer. If your band can do that, if your band is ready for situations like that. I've seen a few bands that do that, and they were always just the most incredibly awesome shows I've ever seen. Those people were great entertainers and performers. So, but yeah, back to these sticks. So, they're no longer the same. I did buy this pair. I basically said, like, this will be my last pair of ProMarks that I buy. I liked them, you know, because of, these are the DC-50. You know, these are like the marching band sticks. Now, I use these just to warm up. I do not play behind a kit with these. These are just to warm my hands up. I've got another tool that I use called a Dynabee. Maybe you've heard of it. I wish I'd brought it out here so I could show it to you for another video, perhaps. And that is like using that for 5 minutes on one hand. So 10 minutes, no, let's say 5 minutes between the two, 2.5 on each hand, is like warming up with these guys, rudiments, for 30 minutes. Now, it's better to play the rudiments in a sense too. It doesn't, you know, it doesn't substitute. You still need to learn the rudiments as a drummer to some degree. Some of them, surely, not maybe all of them. They're not always all applicable, and that kind of stuff can get you in trouble, right? One of my favorite mean cartoons, if you will, you know, that's trying to get a point across, shows a guy auditioning two drummers and two pains. And the first one, like, one drummer is back behind the drum set, and he's just, you know, there's all of these interesting little groupings of notes all around him, so you can just tell, and you see all these kind of sticks are all over the place too. And the guy who's, you know, the hiring manager, if you will, his caption is, "Wow, you're amazing." Look at the next one. This little kid back there going boom, bap, boom, boom, bap, boom, bap. Caption, "You're hired." That's the difference. So the sticks that I'm switching to are Vic Firth. Right? I kind of came back. If you can't beat them, join them. These are really cool. I like these. These are the Zorro brand. Zorro's a really cool drummer. Maybe you've heard of him. Maybe you haven't heard of him. You should check him out. If you haven't heard of him, you should know who Zorro is, I think. And it's just a very unique, I like unique signature sticks. The thing about signature sticks is the idea is that the artist works with the brand to develop something that is both what they kind of want to use, but is also something that's similar to what they kind of already have in their product line. In other words, something that they can build, something that is going to be worth a darn. So these little beaded heads are something that I'm not really used to. I'm used to using acorn, but these are a little different. They give a flatter, darker, duller sound on cymbals, but at the same time, they still give definition. The problem with the acorns is that it will chip off, and you'll have just a completely flat, soft edge. And it's crazy how it works out. You're holding the stick, but it always turns to that flat spot. And you'll always find yourself playing on that flat spot. You'll turn the stick while you're playing, just rotate it, and it'll go back anyways. It's really hard to keep it off of those flat spots once they form. You just pretty much just need to toss the stick or use it as the butt end, you know, that you're going to use for your backbeat on your snare drum. These seem to sort of like solve that problem, is what I'm thinking by looking at it, and it's pretty cool. So I still get that definition. It's sort of a compromise. Speaking of compromise, I can see the sun glaring on the lens, so I'm going to go ahead and bid you adieu. I want to get in there and get working on this 908 jam. What am I saying? 909 jam. So, hey, it's good talking with y'all. We'll see. Wipeout, but with paradiddles.